Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to be doing an album reaction today. We're going to be looking at Lightbearer's Silver Tongue album. I'm going to try to get this done in a single take, but depending on how long this runs, I may need to take some breaks to rest my voice or whatever, get some water, maybe I'll run out or whatnot. So we'll have jump cuts there. You guys won't notice any pausing or anything like that, but I try to get these all done in one take so it's a nice fluid experience from start to finish as a viewing experience. I don't know where the songs cut, where the album has harsh stops between tracks, but I've been told to listen to the song in 20-minute gaps. So we'll start with the first track, and I'll lay down some initial thoughts about both what I heard there and expectations I have going forward. Then we'll look at tracks 2 and 3 together, and I'll provide analysis on that. Tracks 4 and 5 together, analysis after that, and finishing it up with track 6, which puts us at 4 20-minute chunks. We're looking at an hour and 20 minutes of music alone. This is probably going to be quite close to a 3-hour video, if not more. So, let's get started on this and see what Lightbringer is bringing to the table today. Alright, diving in. Track 1, Beautiful is the Burden. Certainly starting off with a creepiness, just this white noise static, and this piano. Yeah, beautiful progression. And I think there's going to be a lot of volume dynamic as well. We're 15 dBs under the max, and we're resting here, so I'm excited to see where they take this. Yeah, I'll say we're starting out rather harmonious, uplifting. It's not super challenging, and it's rather peaceful. It's very calming. But we've checked out Lightbearer before. I think the song was like Primus Movens, something like that. I know we're in store for something bigger. Okay. Got some drums coming in on the right. The drums, I was going to say, the drums are bringing intensity. Yeah, so the last beat and a half of the 4 beats, or of the bar that the drums are doing is silence, which means we have this energy and then this silence, and that creates tension before we return back to the drum hits again. The white noise has kind of changed too. It's not so much static as much as wind now. Interesting. Okay, so it does balance out. We do get a left and a right panning on that. It's heavy, it's weighty, but it's still really positive. It's a very raw vocal technique as well. There's like a very high-pitched squealing or whistling or something. It's buried under everything. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I hear it from time to time. Burying the vocals in the mix. I wonder if we'll see more of that through the album, or if that's an artistic decision for this specific moment. So interesting, you know, we've had burying the vocals in, we have a very harsh vocal style, Now we have tremolo picking with fuzz. It's kind of black metal adjacent, but it's very bright and works with clarity, like having this tambourine so far off to the right. You got a polyrhythm right here. And a time signature shift. Or just a tempo change, because this could just be triplets in 4. It's a very slow 4, if that's what it is. Or we're getting like a 2 against 3 kind of hemiola vibe, but that 2's not really present in the music. It would be more of if we sped up the 4/4 to a tempo that would be easier to count. Kind of makes me think that we're in 3 here. Bringing the tremolo picking back. This is a very calming section though, especially after all the yelling. Once again, we have this 4 against 3 polyrhythm. Well, actually, I'm hearing a 5 right here. Oh, the 5 is coming from the guitar. Oh no, the 4 is coming from the guitar. Yeah. So the 4 is in the guitar, the 3 is in the cymbal. And some dark chords right here. Yeah, back to the triplet feel. It's interesting to hear the rhythmic complexities going on in the vocals, where the rest of the band is rather rigid in their time signature. Yeah, and once again we get a little bit of a playful rhythm right here in the cymbals, where the other instrument lays down the meter. I'm gonna have to start looking out for more of that freer rhythmic writing against rigidity. Yeah, bringing in a little bit of dissonance there at the ends. Yeah, a lot of intensity, building up towards something. Bringing back this idea. Is there additional compression being applied to the vocals? Once again, it's a very uplifting sound right here. Cymbals are ringing out through the entire soundsphere. They are massive. And we bring back the white noise. Alright. It sounds like it's going to move us right into the next track, but like I mentioned, we're going to take a stopping point every 20 minutes, which I think is going to be good for me. Uh, so there's a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff going on in here, and yeah, I think having 20-minute intervals of music to talk about is going to be both good for my ability to to analyze what's going on, but also just for my sanity. Because I'm having a real hard time jamming with this. Maybe that'll change as we dig more into it. There's a lot of beautiful elements, and I really love those moments, but pretty much anytime the vocals come in, I'm just kind of, I'm not here for it. I'm not. I'm going to preface this. You guys know me. I come into everything with an open mind. I provide both an objective and a subjective look at things. And I'm going to do my best to showcase everything that these guys are putting on the table. And they really are. There's a lot of cool things that we're going to talk about here. But I got to be upfront with it. I'm not digging these vocals. I'm really hoping they change up somewhere in here. We get some clean vocals in at least one song, maybe. I don't know, but yeah, like I said, the parts with the vocals, it's not even just the vocals, it's also just the weight and heaviness and just it's a big, really big oppressive sounds, right? And I can tell that if this is the style that we keep up with for the whole song, first of all, I'm going to find a lot of peace in those moments when we kind of break it down a little bit and enter more of the melodic moments. I'm going to be really looking forward to those. But I think this is going to be another album where I'm a bit fatigued by the end of it. And that's fine. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, right? It's art that's challenging me, and I always will search that out. But I can kind of see where this is going, and I think I'm going to be a bit wiped by the end. Um, so yeah, where do we start? So I've been taking notes just because I think we're going to have a lot to talk about here. This is probably easily going to be a 3.5 hour video. You guys want to pause right here, get some water, get some snacks. You planning to watch this in one shot? You'll be here a while. Yeah, so we start off the song with the white noise and some acoustic instruments. And we slowly build this for like 5 minutes, a huge portion of the track. And actually, come to think of it, I think the majority of the song is going to be moments of that clarity, that beauty, the acoustic elements, right? With the layering that focuses on melody and harmony. It's interesting to me then that that the heavier sections with the harsh vocals in them were such a large part of the song that it kind of turned me off a little bit, some of that. When looking back on it retrospectively, I think it was a minority, right? I really don't think that the harsh vocal sections, the heavy sections, were there that often. Out of the 18 minutes, I'd say we're probably looking at 40% of the track because we even start off with a 5 minute acoustic bit. So, yeah, it's kind of bonkers that it had such an effect on me that it felt like it was more present than it probably actually was. Anyways, back to this. Um, so we have the opening section is super chill for like 5.5 minutes or something, and then the heaviness comes in, right? And the first thing I noticed with this heavy section is that it was heavy but not dark, right? It has a lot of the properties of black metal as far as sort of, or even post rock, I suppose, with having this unified, really heavy sound, right? Post rock actually might be a really great analogy for this. Maybe this is post rock, like a very progressive post rock, though. Um, but yeah, so it has this heavy oppressive sound, tons of fuzz. It's very loud. We're working with very simple, well, not simple, short, repetitive riffs going on in the guitars. The drum patterns are pretty short as well. The bass pattern is pretty short. And even the vocal rhythm, because it's harsh vocals, so we're not really looking at pitch here. We're mostly looking at the rhythmic cadence of it is cyclical as well. We typically have an idea, and I think there's like two rhythmic ideas he jumps between. in this section, but there's still this larger pattern that it follows. And yeah, so I think post-rock is going to fit well here. But despite all this weight, it is still bright, right? We have this tremolo-picked guitar sitting above everything, just kind of soaring up there. And by the end of the track, the final time that we see this section, we have cymbals just super wide, reverberating all across the entire song, or all across the entire sound sphere, just taking up all this space. It is very present, this brightness, both from the guitar and the shimmering of the cymbals, are just dominating the sound. In fact, the bass kick, the bass guitar, the snare hit kind of cracks through all of it, but even it gets drowned out a little bit. And the vocals themselves get completely drowned out by this higher end stuff. It is a very interesting type of oppressive sound, at least to me. Maybe other people have heard a lot of this and are like, whatever. Maybe it's going to make sense when I dig into the lyrics. I mean, y'all have been picking some really great albums for me to analyze where I can tie lyrical and musical themes together. I think I've done that on every album so far. They've all been what I would say is something close to conceptual, which is honestly the best kind of album to do this kind of long form analysis on. But yeah, so maybe, like I said, maybe we'll figure that one out later. But yeah, anytime that there's a higher end sound, whether it's the electric guitar or the cymbals, or maybe if we get some cleans later on in the song, even strings and violins that are present here, they dominate all the lower end stuff. No matter what the section is, the mix favors the brightness. And it's really interesting to have this weight, this heaviness from the mix, or from the production, I should say. Just having all these instruments coming together, being present all at the same time at such a loud volume that is paired with brightness and even, I would say, possibly levity at times. It is a very, to me, like I said, strange sound to have a light gravity, a light weight. And that's not to say that the weight itself is light, it's that I'm feeling both of these simultaneous. I feel the pressure of all of the timbres together, but I also feel levity in the notes that are selected. It feels like an oxymoron. It shouldn't exist. They're contrasting concepts, but they bring them both together in a sound that to me feels strange again. I think that's the best word for it. It puts me in a mindset that isn't possible, right? Now, talking about how the music works, the vocals are an interesting aspect because unlike the music, which jumps between light and melodic and heavy and textural, the vocals are only heavy and textural. There is this rawness to them. It sounds like somebody yelling, actually. I can kind of hear an element of pitch to it more so than something like a fry vocal. And it also just doesn't have that throatiness, right, of a fry vocal. Because like the fry it's a crackling sound you make in your throat that you project out, and it sort of bounces all around to get the over and undertones. But with this, it sounds very forward placed. It sounds like the sound is being projected from the front of the mouth closer to the teeth, which makes it to me sound more like a yell. It sounds like someone yelling with vocal compression put on top of it. And I'm not a vocal coach. I don't know how sustainable or healthy that kind of vocal style is, but from my limited knowledge, that's not something you want to do. That's going to damage your vocal cords over time. So maybe, probably that's not what he's doing, but he's at least achieving something that sounds like that. It sounds like he's yelling. And like I said, to me, that ends up creating very raw sound. It isn't just the crackling that we create, which is kind of an inhuman sound. At least in English, we don't typically use the fry popping in our colloquial speech. So to get that extra compression put in there on top of our human speech makes it sound very, like I said, raw. Like this is somebody screaming for help, not somebody making a vocal technique for singing, which is what growling and fry screaming tends to sound to me. It's not a natural sound, but it's so closely related to music that it feels natural in that sense. Whereas yelling is something people do when they're desperate. It's not part of normal speech, and it's rarely used in music because it is, from my understanding, typically a destructive technique. Um, so it feels, like I said, very raw right here. It's somebody who's very desperate. That's kind of what I get from the ideas of the narrator or this first person character. What, however we dig into this, there's a desperation to it, that we're going to get into. Now, the next two things I want to talk about that I've kind of touched on here in this first track are both rhythmic based. The first one is polyrhythm. There is a few sections in here where we see components of 3 versus 4. One time I thought I felt a 5, and I still think I felt the 5, but it wasn't present in the music. And like I mentioned, at that point, the guitars were playing on every beat if we had 4 beats per bar, and the cymbals were playing on every beat if we had 3 beats per bar. So we're getting this 3 against 4 idea. And this happened quite a few times. It was always 3 against 4. And I started to look for this in more and more places, and it never really popped up again. There was like 2 or 3 sections that utilized it, but otherwise the song was either in 4 or 3. And I'm curious if this is something that we're going to see often or something that we just witness in this track. I'm curious how much polyrhythm is going to be a key aspect of this band. But yeah, so we have that idea. We're going to be looking more out for that tracks going forward if they continue to use this. And the last thing is free rhythm versus rigidity. And actually, I'm kind of seeing a lot of verses in here because we have musically calm and serene versus heavy and weighty. Even though the heavy and weighty is bright, it is still, it's still heavy. It's still in stark contrast to the acoustic bits. We also have bright versus dark, or high pitch versus low pitch, I think is another way to word that. Where, like I mentioned, the cymbals, the higher end of the guitar, violins completely overpower the harsh vocals, the bass guitar, the bass kick. The mix definitely favors the lighter end of this one. We also have polyrhythm, 4 versus 3 popping up in several places. And even come to think of it, like I said, the song bounces back and forth between 4 versus 3, and 3, almost like some sort of battle where one side becomes dominant and takes over. Like maybe we're in 3-4 for this section, and then we hit 4 versus 3, and then maybe 4 wins that battle, and we go into the next section and we're in 4. Man, if I listen to this track again, that would be what I listen for, is the progression of the polyrhythm. Do we ever go straight from 4 to 3, or is there always the polyrhythm between those two static time signatures? I kind of remember there being that way. I don't ever remember going from 4/4 into 3/4. We always hit a polyrhythm section between them. But, I'm trying to remember 20 minutes of music. I'm sure there was a moment I forgot. But yeah, so that's there. And now we have free rhythm versus rigidity, where a lot of the time we're going to hear instruments play notes that are on a beat or on an off beat. If they're playing eighth notes, it's a very rigid sound. When they're in 3/4, they play 1 2 3 1 2 3. If it's in 4/4, they're playing 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. It's never really playful. There's not really an element of freedom to it. That is, except for a couple of places. I mentioned one. It was somewhere around the midpoint. The vocal melody was a bit more freeing. It kind of had some grace notes in there. Put like a 16th note into a quarter note to kind of get this nice little just a varying rhythmic component to it, right? It's not just straight eighth notes or straight quarter notes. The notes themselves have varying lengths, which create more of a free-flowing pattern rather than a rigid one. And then we saw it in the cymbal work near the end. It started in the heavy section, and the cymbal work bled into the acoustic section, and we retained it there. And yeah, so we have elements of free rhythm versus rigid, and every time that there's a free moment, we hear it against a rigid one, which I guess technically isn't too big of a thing to point out, because very rarely do we ever listen to music where not at least one instrument is playing the metronome part, right? That's the whole point of the drum kit in a lot of bands, is to just kind of lay the metronome down, to lay the meter down, right? You get your snare on 1 and 3, or your bass kicks on every beat or whatever. So I guess that's actually not that big of a deal, because there's always going to be a rigid element. Yeah, maybe I can scratch that one off, but it is something I noticed, and we'll see how that continues going into the next track. I think that's everything I want to talk about right here. Let's dig into the lyrics real quick and see if we can't figure out what's going on. The song is called Beautiful Is This Burden. And I don't quite know what to make of that. So we start off, says, languid skin invigorate, our vacant lot extend to us a gratitude so that we may bestow purpose upon thyself. So, I mean, the vacant lot extends just sounds like he's saying, we have a blank slate of tasks to do, right? There's nothing to do here. So we can do whatever we want, right? We can bestow purposes upon ourselves. We, the inverted host, hallowed magnitude, divided by our deeds, resulted in internment. Got nothing there. I have gleaned truths. In primeval forms, the absence of his mark has left me with no choice to turn my ears away, to shut my eyes forever, and open up anew upon our humble plight. So, something has happened where this person has distanced himself from someone else. Not quite sure where we're going yet, but he says that the absence of his mark has left me no choice but to turn my ears away, to not hear about him, to not see about him, and to open up anew upon our humble plight. To basically, speaking of their own purpose, creating his own purpose earlier. All right. The quality of renewal, adapt, we wax and wane, transitory and glorious, fortifying life's reach. Unbridled by a master, with every step we take, he closer courts disaster, the jester takes a bow. It's interesting that a lot of the syllabic cadence is very similar throughout all this. We have the same number of syllables in each of these lines, but there isn't too much of a rhyme scheme. Beyond these confines, most noble voices shrill, behind each throat a vibrant will, an audience so hungry. The gauze between each plane, many worlds adorned, those singled out by heaven, the loudest mind of all, bleeding from these walls, the loudest mind of all. So, he says, many worlds adorned that were singled out by heaven. I'm going to have to keep that in mind. I don't know if it's just because we've been on the last one we checked out also was religious in context. That was Umgwa's Exercises of Futility. So I don't know, heaven isn't capitalized here, so I don't know if it's really that important, but maybe it's just because I have it on my mind from that one. I'm gonna keep on it. We'll see what's going on here. But he does talk about the gods between each plane, many worlds adorned. There's kind of getting a supernatural air to it. Everything else prior to this has just kind of been very eloquently spoken, but eloquently spoken, but very rooted still. I hadn't seen anything that would suggest anything unnatural or unrealistic, I suppose would be a way to put it, not of this plane as they speak about it. But yeah, we're bringing in planes, worlds, and heaven. So maybe we're pushing this into more of a science fiction realm or fantasy realm. Torches lit, light bearers, en masse the cavalcade does form, our bodies bound alluvium. Cast your fire, fill this hollow, euphoric surf rails vehemently, relentless surge, our fevers break. Yeah, we're almost done here. We got two more stanzas. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. Like I said, it seems this character, this person, has escaped from somebody, right? Because he says the absence of his mark. I mean, it kind of reminds me of a brand, right? Like what farmers do with cows to show what's theirs, right? And he says that he no longer has this mark, or maybe he just doesn't have it at all. The absence of his mark has left me with no choice but to turn away from all of this, right? I'm not going to hear about it, not going to look about it. I have my own purpose now, the one that I am bestowing upon myself, as he says in the first stanza. Even says unbridled by a master. So it's possible even that this is a slave who has found a way to escape slavery and has found renewed purpose or actually has found their own purpose, right? Maybe they don't know a life before this. Even says our vacant lot extended, right? So it's possible that this person was a slave to somebody and escaped and now doesn't know what to do with their life. Possibilities are limitless. They've never had this option. Maybe they were born into slavery and now they are escaping that. And there's definitely a rise of rebellion, it seems. Torches lit. It says many noble voices shrill behind each throat a vibrant will. Our voices are shrill. Maybe it's because they've been chanting or screaming for so long, but despite that, we have, a lot of willpower, a brightness to the willpower, kind of tying into some of the musical ideas here. It says the audience is hungry. So he says, cast your fires, fill this hollow, euphoric surf rails vehemently, relentless surge, our fevers break. So yeah, there's definitely revolution going on here by an oppressed people. With pick and axe we will wield the aether. I don't know how to pronounce that. With whetted blades we'll hone this realm. We'll build a tower, a concentric city, a minaret of great magnitude, apogee of our resolve. I will climb atop, I will spread my wings, and touch 10 million other worlds, and I will sing my sermon. My words will carry upon solar winds, will be so loud as to envelop his voice. So yeah, it basically sounds like the leader of a revolution who has escaped slavery and is helping others escape and is bringing a revolution to those who have oppressed them. And this is his war cry, right? This is how he instills courage into those who are fighting alongside him. That's what I'm getting out of all this, right? And he even says, it's not so much of where we've been, it's where we're going. We're going to build the tower, we're going to build this great city, we're going to, build the minarets of our great magnitude, like show the world of what this all is. He even says, we're going to go beyond just our little area. He says, I'm going to climb atop, spread my wings, and touch 10 million other worlds and sing my sermon. Our story will be told to many others. He could be talking metaphorically about other generations. 10 million other worlds. He could be talking about cultures, or he could be quite literal, going back to the idea of the sci-fi with the planes breaking down and worlds being singled out by heaven and stuff like this. He could literally be talking about spreading his his revolution through other planes of existence. But he says, my worlds will carry upon solar winds, and they'll be so loud to envelop his voice. And I guess his is just, the oppressor, the person who has enslaved them for so long. All right, 45 minutes into this video, we got one song down. Let's get back to it. We've got Amalgam coming in now. And like I said, we're going to do Amalgam and Matriarch back to back. And then we'll pause it again and we'll discuss what we've heard from that point on. So let's get back to it. Interesting. So the white noise did fade out completely at the end of that track. And once again, we're starting off with environmental sounds, not musical in nature. Oh, I forgot about talking about the drums last song. I was talking about them bringing up tension. It makes sense in the light of the lyrics. And even right here, they're used for to imply sort of like potential energy. We have the crack of those snares kind of feels like we're tense, ready to strike, right? Like a snake coiling up. There's all this tension ready to go. It's not ready to release though. And this whole section right here is just building in intensity. I feel like I'm getting faked out here. Where's the big moment? We got a retardando there as well. Okay. Lining up the guitars with the vocals right there to really emphasize these lines. Song has a huge slow burn element to it. This guitar is very grungy too. I don't know if that's just me. Really interesting chords to use as well. There's no resolution here at all. We actually have two vocals here. Interesting that the foundational guitar lick didn't really change much between this section and the solo section. Going for a halftime feel. I don't think the tempo's changed, we've just emphasized half as many beats. Once again, dual vocals. I wish I knew what lines they were. Understand what was getting the emphasis. Really nice cymbal bouncing back there. Ooh, we shifted to that triplet feel. So we have the triplets providing the 3 and the cymbal is giving us the 4. A lot of tension in the chord as well. really like the snare and bass pulse right here. It's a really nice beat. The way that they kind of shift who accents and who leads into the accent is really nice. Ooh, whoa. So we were in 4, we hit a 4 versus 3, and now we're in a dominant 3. I'm telling you, this might be a thing. Oh, you know what? We're still in 4. Ooh, whoa. That bass guitar is just really chugging along here. Now we're going to push forth into Matriarch. Man, talk about a massive tempo shift. I also noticed all 3 of these tracks end and begin very quiet with atmospheric pieces. Almost sounds like there's breathing. Interestingly, the cymbal work sounds like it kind of moves in and out of being in time. Hearing so good. There's really nice moments of counterpoint and harmonizing. The vocals kind of move in and out against the guitar and the bass. Sometimes it's right in time with them, sometimes it's doing its own thing. Rising tension in the bass and drums. The violins are bringing a new melody in. Got a lot of darkness in this chord progression. This track is certainly taking its time. More so than the last two. I'm real curious where our narrator is at this point in the story. Maybe they're feeling defeated. Maybe the revolution didn't go over so well. Feels like it just keeps wanting to drag further. And I think they're very intentionally sometimes getting out of sync, or they left in imperfect takes to make it feel like it wants to slow down even more. Yeah, real nice way to bring this next section in. Not really adding any extra layers, but increasing the speed at which we change notes on the guitar. And the guitar is even cut out here. It inspired this next section without becoming a part of it. He is putting a little bit of a voice in there, isn't he? That's a compressed clean. Interesting to pair all that aggression in the vocal type, or maybe passion might be another word to put it, with the beauty of the music. first time the song's gotten heavy. And it's also introducing a lot of dissonance. Once again, just the width of that cymbal just really extending far outside the headphones. Also a really empty sounding section. Unlike the heavy parts from 1 and 2, this doesn't feel weighty. There's something missing. It might be the foundation. Alright. Now once again we have a fade out with a white noise sound, and I am going to guess that when we bring the next track in, we will have something similar. A white noise to bring the track in. So Amalgam, I really didn't have much to add. I was not too upset that I decided to dive straight into Matriarch here. Amalgam pretty much just continued to solidify some of the ideas that I presented in track 1. However, track 3. So we start out with a fade-in intro with white noise and acoustic instruments, just like 1 and 2. I knew what was going on here. I see the pattern. I get it. I'm ready for it. Bring the noise, and it just never came. In fact, we stuck with the acoustic instruments for 9 minutes of that track, and we had clean vocals for the first sung section of it as well. And this whole section feels very, very vulnerable. Almost defeated, I think, is a word that I said while listening to it. It definitely seems to be somebody at their lowest point, which sort of makes sense given where we are in the album. We are halfway through it, both track-wise. We just finished track 3 out of 6, and time-wise. We just finished the second of 4 sets of 20 minutes groups. So this is definitely the point of the album where we should be hitting the climax or getting close to the climax. I'm going to assume that that's going to be our next 20-minute peak and our next 20-minute group, and our final 20-minute group will be the denouement. It'll be the coming down from the climax, the resulting elements of the rising action. That's what I'm guessing how things are going to go. Also, track 5 is called Aggressor and Usurper. That seems to be the height of conflict right there. So I think I'm pretty safe with that guess there. Something I wanted to talk about and completely forgot was the production. I had kind of likened this to black metal at one point, and then I kind of fixed that and said, oh wait, maybe this is post-rock. And I think the big difference there, now that I'm really getting into it, is production. This utilizes the tremolo picking, the harsh vocals, the noisy guitar tones, the compression. It shares some similarities with black metal, but the big difference is the cleanliness of the production. What we kind of figured out 2 weeks back with Hi-Fi Black Metal Week is that black metal is more of a texture thing. It's more about being gritty. If you have blackened pop, you're pretty much just kind of grittifying pop. There are musical elements to it, like the tremolo picking, double bass kicks, the very specific black metal growl or harsh, but it really does come down to the production. And that's where this sort of separates. It utilizes some of the compositional techniques of black metal, but everything is clear and there is a concise and meticulous use of the sound sphere. Instruments have placement, violins are pushed to sides, cymbals are purposefully placed across your hearing spectrum. It feels like I'm enveloped by instruments. And when they all come together, I do kind of get a bit of that wall of sound element, but every instrument is still clearly heard. And that's another side of it. But when instruments are not all together and we're only getting a few layers, instruments are very particularly placed. Sometimes it's far right, sometimes it's center left, sometimes it's a little higher, sometimes it's a little lower. They really play with where the instruments are heard. It almost feels like I am literally there in front of a stage, and sounds that are on stage left feel like they're actually coming at me from the right side. It is expert use of the sound sphere, of instrument placing or voicing placement. But then, like I said, there's also clarity of instrumentation, clarity of timbre. Even when everything is playing all at once, I can say, hey, what's the guitar doing? And instantly tune into the guitar tone itself. I can do the same with the drums, the bass, the vocals, violin, specific cymbals. I can differentiate between left and right panned guitars because they're both doing different things often. There is a large amount of clarity in place of not only where instruments are in the sound sphere, but ensuring that they all have their own unique and identifiable timbre, and that while it does come together into a large sound, that you never just see a blob. Taking the idea of the forest for the trees, it never gets to a point where you just see brown and green and you know that's a forest. I can still see the individual trees, but it doesn't detract from the fact that I understand this is a forest. I still see it as a forest. It is a very meticulously crafted production style. And it works very well here. It captures a lot of the weight that black metal and post-rock can capture through their use of kind of aiming for that wall of sound without fully committing to it. So it's sort of a cheat code for for this production, where they're getting clarity of sound, but also the full weight of wall of sound, which is the opposite of clarity. I really don't know how they went about doing it. But their producer, which might be them, according to this description on Bandcamp, it says that they were formed in 2010. The band is an all-encompassing DIY art, music, and narrative project. If it's all-encompassing do-it-yourself, I'm going to assume that they are their own producers. So yeah, whichever person in the band, or if all of them put a hand in, I don't know how it worked, but a pat on the back for the production on this. It is perfectly tuned for what this project appears to be aiming for. Now, Amalgam was pretty much straightforward heaviness from start to finish. Matriarch was the opposite. We got a bit of heaviness at the end, but it was also chaotic. We had a lot of dissonance there, where earlier we would hear brightness in the guitar work, even in the heavier sections, in the metal parts. Here it was introducing dissonance, notes that do not play well together and create that extra tension there. It was going for a very different vibe, but also simultaneously the foundation, I believe, is what was missing, which made it sound flat. It didn't have that big booming command that we had heard in the first two tracks when the heavier sections came in. This was heavy because of the volume. This was heavy because of the guitar fuzz, the overdrive, but it was not weighty, and it did not have the brightness to it. This was a very different kind of heaviness. And there were a couple of moments in the acoustic section where we had growls put up against the clean vocals. So we have a few lines of clean vocals and then like a few syllables of growling and then back to the clean vocals. I'm kind of curious where all that fits in. You know, are they two different characters? You know, is this two different voices for the same character? Is this just, is the growling his determination and the clean his defeat? Maybe it's his something on the inside that tells him that he's not gonna be able to make it, right? That this revolution isn't gonna work. Who knows? Actually, I guess I'm gonna know. We're diving into the lyrics. Let's check out what's been happening. So next up we have Amalgam. I guess it says the fallen host, but then it has a colon after that, and it looks like it's in a little different font. I don't know if this is something that's in the song or if this is like in a script where it tells you who's saying what, right? I don't know who the fallen host is though. That name hasn't been referenced yet. But I also see later on down, well, we see the commencement of the climb, colon. And again, I don't know if that's actually the lyrics or if that is describing what's happening. In which, if it is describing what's happening, I feel like I'm cheating a little bit. I try to go in here as uninformed as possible. Well, as uninformed as is feasible. There's definitely sometimes that it's better to go in with a little bit of knowledge of what's going on. So anyways, it's possible that this is either detailing the fallen host or is being spoken through the mouth of the fallen host. I don't know who the fallen host is though. It says the pit, it breathes, revive. Bronchial grow limbs augment. Life endure enamor. Life endure enamor. No idea. Ghost flesh, mortar truth, scaffold built of dust coalescent, substance formed of our own volition. Let the rings arrange stone substratum. The conical, it lifts atop our diligence. Crescent edifice upon which stands our creed, pile the sediment, enraptured sentiment. We the chisel carve the lodestone, we the pestle empty the receptacles, anvils chime out, clenched fists molten, girders will smelt under Calum breath. So I'm not quite sure everything that's going on here. The first half kind of threw me for a loop, but the bottom half definitely brings back the ideas of the resistance, right? We are the chisel, we're going to carve these lodestones. We're the pestle, we're going to empty the receptacles, right? We are the tools of this war, right? And we're going to do what we need to ensure victory. It says the anvils chime out, and we, with clenched fists, molten girders will smelt under Calum breath. So basically, you know, we're preparing for war. We're building our tools, you know, both metaphorically, us being the tools of war, and physically, technically, literally, you know, we are making the tools that we will need to do this. It's kind of what I'm getting there. It says, granite serenade tolls with resonance, the larynx of the earth. Tintabulate? That's a word? Tintinabulate. Cathedral serenade, nave reverberate. You know, I'm picking up this idea. You guys are throwing me a couple of albums here where I need a dictionary and thesaurus just to understand what's going on. But we're going to keep pushing through. This says the commencement of the climb. Again, I don't know if that's spoken in the lyrics or not. Ever upward, so we will, with treaty in hand, our voices shrill, bringing back this idea, right, of yelling about our demands. It even says we have a treaty this time. It says we stand atop our beacon tower, our continents of spires, climb high. Okay, so maybe we've built that city, you know, that he was talking about earlier. He's built his little city and he's ready to tell the millions of other worlds his sermon, right? Climb high with litany, make haste our mark indelible, our host forsaken. Patriarch intolerable, one should not rule over all. Oh, one should not rule over all. Our host forsaken, reward our petulance, we will not go quietly. Our host forsaken, hand over hand ascension, we reach the summit of our rage. So yeah, basically, this is him climbing, his towers, whatever he needs to climb to reach the point where he can speak across the plains. And he's saying, hey, we're here. You, our host, our owner, the person who tried to rule us, we forsake you. You are not going to rule over all of us. You should not have that power. One person should not have that power. And he repeats it, our host forsaken, continuously stating this idea. He says, reward us for the work we've done. If you don't, it's going to get nasty. We will not go quietly, he says. Finishes out the song with gray flanks, seamless shards, incorporate, proliferate, grow this pinnacle of stone, our cold house, our exile home. So it just sounds like he's saying, this is where we're going to be. Let's get stronger here, kind of vibe. That's what I'm getting there. We move into Matriarch. Yeah, I think I'm cheating here. Okay, so I don't know that I was going to pick up on this without it, but we do seem to have voices in this one. We have a part said by Lucifer and a part said by the Authority. I was going to say, I wonder if there is a set of lyrics without these directions of who's saying what, but I don't know. It don't matter now, does it? I doubt that the word Lucifer and the Authority are sung in here. It's probably but see, what's interesting too is that assuming. Okay, so oh man. So let's walk this back, right? We have somebody who defies an owner who believes that they have the right as one to rule them all. Christian God, right? He escapes his rule, casts out his mark, and starts a revolution to state that, we will not be ruled by you. This is pretty much straight up Lucifer's story, right? I think. I'm not as well versed in this, but I believe that he attempted to attack God, like he was God's right-hand man at one time, and attacked him, and there's this war between angels and demons or whatever, and God won, and Lucifer was cast to hell, right? I think this might be a telling of that story. He realizes that he doesn't want God to be the one who rules everything. He starts an uprising. He gets all these demons on his side. Presumably, it hasn't been stated that way yet, but and he creates his army, his city, and says to the Authority, which I'm kind of assuming is God here, especially now that we've already referenced heaven once in here, and says, look, you need to let us be who we are. If you don't, we're not going to go quietly. Sounds to me like the beginning of war. And it does create, assuming I'm right, we have four more songs worth of lyrics to get through. Assuming I'm right, though, this does create a warlike scenario where two ideas are against each other. They're warring. And so we have opposing ideas. Lyrically, musically, I already mentioned we have opposing ideas between heavy and positivity, although that was really present only in the first two tracks. I'll be interested to see if that continues on through the rest, but it is interesting that the brightness was covering up the lower tones in that first song, almost like the glory of heaven, or even the voice of God himself, being the higher guitar bits and the cymbal work covering up Lucifer's voice in the opening track. Every time the higher end came in, it really drowned out what the vocals were doing. It also kind of puts an idea on the free rhythm versus rigidity with the authority. I mean, they're even putting the idea of rigidity in that. They're not calling it Lucifer versus God, it's Lucifer versus authority. All right, so we have this idea of freedom versus rigidity baked into those themes. Now, granted, the second and third tracks haven't really dealt with this. We're going to see how it looks on 4 and 5, but it's possible. I mean, it was showcased in the first track that was where Lucifer, I don't know if he got cast out to hell yet. It wouldn't work with the narrative that I understand is the mythology they're working off of. But he does seem to be in a place outside of heaven, a world or a plane, but it wasn't specifically called hell. So I'm not sure where he's at, but it could definitely be that he is, in already been cast out, right? That's already happened in some manner. And that kind of also brings in the 4 versus 3, right, from the first track. And it showed up a little bit in the second track, but not so much. And it could be that this was Lucifer outside of heaven. And that's why these combative, opposing ideas aren't present anymore. The first song was about how his ideals contrasted with the authorities. The second, third song, or the second song at least, is about gearing up for a battle, right? Gearing up to be the opposition, for resistance. The authorities' point of view wasn't in here anymore. We don't have resistance. We are hearing a singular focused concept. So it's possible that that's what's going on. I don't know. Yeah, I think that's all I got here. So that brings me to track 3's lyrics. This is the solemn, vulnerable, quiet one. Let's see what's going on here. So it says we start with Lucifer speaking. Bellow taunting winds, parched throats retort. The febrile flocks ebb ever forward. Sand parts to mark their passing. They lift their hands from the earth. This defining osteo impasse to ascend from quadruped. Of all life the onus lies in her lap. No rhyme or reason, malleable spines, forgiving. It kind of sounds like he's talking about human life beginning on Earth, as far as the idea of evolution is concerned. He says to ascend from quadrupeds, that's walking on 4 legs. We're ascending from that, right? We moved from walking on 4 legs to being biped, walking on 2. He says all life, the onus, lies in her lap. So I'm going to assume this could be like a Gaia or a Mother Earth or just some sort of, spiritual personification of life itself. It says no rhyme or reason, right? There's no calling out the idea that God created everything and placed it for specific purposes, a la Adam and Eve, the creation of the universe in 7 days. He says there's no rhyming or reason. There's no purpose to any of it. It just happened because life found a way. It says malleable spines, forgiving. So he's triumphant, the weight of all, consequential, the penny drops, branches partition, lineage ingrained, womb significant. She, the worth of the multitude, transitions of our assembly, visceral wires in sinew flare, delicately hew through thought's ascent. I mean, this could just be, I mean, a lot of it's going over my head, but I wonder if this is just a very flowery way of speaking about possibly the growth of humans as we evolved from where we once were to where we are today, or even where we were thousands of years ago, right? It says submerged in clay, feet earned competence, pathways through contours, encephalic routes. Crow lines tell stories, every scar hides a tale, we foster our reverie with weathered tenacity. Yeah, a lot of that's going right over my head, but that's kind of the vibe I'm getting, right? Especially when we pair it back with what we saw at the beginning. And it just seems to be Lucifer detailing how humanity evolved and continued to populate the earth, I suppose. And then it even says, within this mind I find my ward, bearer of the sword. Humanity then, right? Humanity would be who helps him fight the war against the authority, I guess is where he's going with that. The authority comes in and says, these whims carry, these whims noticed, this mind it threatens purpose. Time gathers impetus, this mind must obey. So my guess is the authority states that humanity has a very specific person and they purpose according to him, and that humanity must obey. Continues to call it the mind, right? It says, you know, this mind actually might even be the open-mindedness, the free will of humanity threatens purpose, not necessarily humanity's purpose as is told through their own, but through the purpose that the authority dictates. And it's interesting that in this case, Lucifer is the progenitor of free will. You know, he even said it's the very, very first line, well, the first stanza of the album is that through this blank slate I find myself, purpose given by thyself, right? He says that I will give myself purpose. I imbue free will upon myself now that I am no longer in the gaze of the authority. And through that, I shun him completely. I turn my eye to him. I turn my ear to him. I will no longer engage with the authority. My will is my own now. And now in story 3, or song 3, Lucifer is looking upon humanity and saying, these will be the vessels of my war. This is how I will help spread the idea of free will, no longer constrained by the authority. You guys will be my sword. I will preach free will. That is his sermon that he preaches from the top of his spires. And the authority says, no, this threatens everything, right? I need you guys to obey. I need the perfection of my plan to be followed through so you can meet my purpose. It is my will put on you. So yeah, the authority seems quite scared at this point. Or upset, one of the two. Lucifer retorts, he says, I hear this mind burgeon, I feel his grip tighten, my words are a salve, I fathom its rhythm, I challenge his hymn. So he basically says, if you don't want to be controlled, if you want to have control over your own destiny, listen to my song, listen to my sermon, listen to what I'm speaking. I give you what you need to combat the authority. Oh man, this is a wonderful album to listen to today. I might get into that. If you know, you know, right? I might get into it later when we dive deeper into things. But if you know, you know. Let's get back to it though. We're going to check out the next track, or the next grouping. We're going to have Clarus, which is just 2 minutes long, and then Aggressor and Usurper at 17. It's going to pull us into our next 20-minute block. So let's see what's happening going forward. Another slow intro into it. Ugh. What?
For I am no king, and I claim no throne. I will stand atop the highest point in hell, and I will raise my voice up, so that
very hymnic. I think it's interesting that we just came off of a track that said, listen to my hymn, it'll be your salve, and it feels like the hymn.
I seek eyes that see through worlds. I seek a mouth to voice my cause. I seek a tongue lined with silver, so that my words are clear and just. For my Father has lied.
I kind of wish I'd broken this up differently and kept Amalgam alone and then did Matriarch into that, because I think it's really cool having the hymn right after saying listen to my hymn. That bass is rumbling. Yeah, we got that rhythmic layering again. We're in 3 right now. very nice layering the cleans with that. It's interesting, the wall of sound idea is just completely gone. I don't know if I'm just adapting to it. This just sounds like rock to me right now. Again, there's this beauty, this brightness on top of everything. Ooh. Yeah, I'm real curious if there's any reason thematically for jumping between 3/4 and 4/4 so often, or if it's just what fits each song. Because aside from track 1, each track just seems to have a home time signature, and I'm beginning to see less and less of a pattern as we move on through the album. They definitely got the post-rock sitting on a single idea for a long time formula down though. interesting way to cut that. A lot of drive and energy right here, especially with those constant snare accents. Yeah, the snare rolls, we shifted from the accents to the rolls. The snares are taking up so much more space. That's what that is. Okay, so the snare and drum thing is a mini hemiola. It's a little off, but it's pretty close to a 2 versus 3 idea. Oh, we went back up. We're gonna vamp between them. Okay. Small shift there. And we'll resolve this back. Yeah. Oh, we got the trim. Okay. And the cymbals are doing beats 3 and 4. If this were in 4/4, giving us a 4 against 3 idea once again. 1, 2, 3. Oh, of course the cymbals didn't go this time. I was gonna count out what the cymbals were doing. Oh, actually, that whole section shifted to 4/4. I wonder when that happens. I guess that was when we went to that section coming out of the original 3 where we had the hemiola between the snare and the bass kick. Okay. I knew it was coming because they introduced a lot of unresolved tension in that final chord. And it was either going to resolve and finish out the song, or it was going to move into a new section. 3 minutes to go. New section. Again, we have triplets. Triplet, triplet, triplet. It's close. It's not perfect triplets. It's more like 2 dotted quarters and then a quarter. But the cymbals are emphasizing quarter notes. Guitars are giving us this pedal note idea. Oh, there it is. Back to the pedal note. This section just keeps getting bigger and bigger and wider and wider. Every 16 bars throwing on more layers. And I think this is the point where the vocals have the most amount of spoken sound to them, sung words. A lot of sub bass right there. It is, whoa, I'm just really feeling that. Yeah, I mean, musically, a lot of this is seeing repetition of what we've seen before. We have bouncing back and forth between quieter sections, heavier sections, 3/4 and 4/4. We have the harsh vocals. We have sections that are melodically present. We have sections that are texturally present, and we sort of jump between them. Usually with a bit of tension, I'm noticing that I've started to pick up when we're going to shift from one idea to the next by listening to the chords. They love to, all right, so a lot of this, right, is based on like the post-rock idea of take an idea and play it for a very long time. Just keep playing it, right? Maybe we'll add a couple layers to it and we'll change it up slowly as time goes on, but we're in each of these sections for 5+ minutes long. And so the underlying chord progression is rather cyclical. When things are about to change, they introduce the change in the foundation first. It's usually a small change up in the final chord of the progression before going to the next idea, where we introduce more tension rather than a resolution. Instead of the third chord being a leading chord that shows us how to get to the resolution, we take the leading tone and move towards irresolution. We move towards more dissonance, and then we resolve that dissonance into the new root, the new home tone for the new chord progression, which brings about new ideas. And it's why I got 2 of those transitions spot on, perfect bar for it. I predicted them, and they have a pattern going on here, and I dig it. Once you see the puzzle pieces, once you see the pattern, everything starts to make a little bit more sense. I think the first track, when we started this with its constant jumping back and forth, was starting to throw me for a bit of a loop, and I wasn't really quite seeing the rhyme or reason to it. And it's nice to know that we're all human, and even though some of the thoughts in the song's lyrical themes are about things not having rhyme or reason, that no authority should have that sort of power, we're still human. We're going to find rhyme and reason in the music. Even if they didn't put it in there intentionally, I heard it. We also saw a new idea here with the recurring pedal tone that led into a little bit of a lick at the end of it. We've heard a lot of ideas in here that kind of revolve around pedal tones. It's a real big concept for a lot of their music that I'm hearing in this album, but I don't think we've really heard one that has that kind of partial movement at the end of it to kind of create some contrast between the static element of the pedal tone and a little bit of movement at the end of the passage. So that was kind of neat. I am curious, going into the lyrics, who was the vocals at the end there? Minute 17, or sorry, it's only 16 minutes, like minute 13, 14, somewhere around there. Because we had the vocal layering, we doubled up on it, and it just sounded ultra gnarly. It sounded real disgusting. Not to mention that even without it, like I'd mentioned, we're getting to a point where the harsh vocal has even more sung quality to it. It feels even more so like clean or compressed cleans. It's certainly getting to a point that, at least to me, sounds like a full-on, very natural yell. Like if someone were chasing you and you would involuntarily yell, just make your voice as loud as possible to the point where it cracks. You get that very natural compression due to volume, right? Not a compression that you're controlling with the way that you use your vocal cords. This is your vocal cords being pushed too far to their limits and cracking on their own. And that's what it's starting to sound like. There's even more desperation in here than previously. And maybe what I was hearing before wasn't desperation. As I mentioned earlier in this track, I think it was right at the beginning, I'm not really hearing the wall of sound anymore. And I don't know if I'm just becoming used to it, or if they are beginning to remove either that production or that composition style closer to the end here as the story wraps up for a thematic reason. But a lot of this up until the end, when we started getting to the darker area, but when we look at the brighter guitar lines, it kind of just feels like rock to me. A little bit of a harder rock, but it's kind of just rock. right? If we cut down the length of some of these sections, shorten the song up, and only use clean vocals, I could see at least the beginning 3 or 4 minutes of this showing up on radio stations. At least that's what it sounded like to my ear. Again, I don't know if that's just me getting used to it. Maybe my mind is softening it up because I'm beginning to understand what they're doing, or maybe it is something that they did with the production or the composition. But this song feels lighter to me than the rest up until the ending. Like I said, the ending, we bring in some darker tones, we bring in heavier elements, and the wall of sound element creeped in a little bit more there. I am curious what character was singing though when we had that real gnarly voice. That's something I'll be looking for in the lyrics. Um, so usually with these album reactions, I will develop hypotheses in the first 2 tracks or so about where I think the song's going and any recurring patterns I'm hearing compositionally that I'm going to keep track of and see if they mean anything in the larger scheme of things or if I'm just seeing a pattern that isn't really there yet. 2 songs is not a very big pool to draw data from, especially when it makes up a small portion of the album, even just time-wise. 2 songs here is still 33% of the album, but I mean, you guys get my gist. Um, so one of the things though, sometimes I'm like, oh, I was right on this. I'm going to keep digging into this, going to keep looking for it. And I'm kind of seeing that with the polyrhythm. They brought it back on this track. And the free rhythm versus rigidity, again, we see more of that on this track as well. In fact, we see a lot more freedom, rhythmic freedom in here than I think we've seen in other ones, especially looking at the hemiola idea in the snare and bass kick that we saw about the midway through on this track. There's definitely a lot of fun rhythmic concepts popping up here that we really haven't seen in a couple of tracks. So there are some things that, I'm like, okay, I'm starting to see them, they're working, we're almost done. I think these are solid themes to be engaging with when we wrap all this up, and I kind of, talk about what I think the album's going on about. But one I think I'm going to back down from is the idea of heavy versus light. I brought this in earlier where the brightness of the cymbals and the higher end guitar were drowning out the main vocals. They were drowning out the bass guitar, drowning out the rest of the drum kit. And then especially after I came to the conclusion that this is probably about Lucifer and God and that whole war there, I was like, oh, maybe this is the authority's booming voice covering up Lucifer's voice, making him feel small or whatever. But I don't know anymore. Listening to this track right here, unless a lot of this has to do with Lucifer being in heaven again or having the weight of heaven put on his shoulders, I think it's just kind of the way the song is mixed. I think the idea worked very well for the first track. It wasn't really present in 2 or 3. We kind of hit some darker, heavier tones in the guitar work. The cymbals were still bright and powerful, but they were not paired with the guitar to really have that overwhelming effect of drowning out everything on the lower end. Also, I believe this album is very sympathetic to Lucifer. He, at least to me, is seen as the hero of the story. He is the spreader of free will and the one who brings the free will to the humans, which is very different from the biblical reading in that God gives people free will because it's the only way that he thinks they can. I actually don't know. I know that God does give free will to people in the Bible, but I don't remember his reasoning for it. But it's the whole purpose of sin, right? If we didn't have free will, there would be no need for Lucifer. There'd be no need for, sin or the idea of, an everlasting punishment, so to speak, with hell, because we would all do exactly what God wants. But I can't quite remember why he gave us the choice, why he introduced free will to us in that mythology. But yeah, so like from that angle, God gave man free will for whatever the reason was. But from here, from this perspective, Lucifer, Satan, is the person who gave free will to humanity, and in that case, he's the hero. He's what's allowed us to understand our position and to pull ourselves out from under the boot of the authority, right? He's a hero in this story, and from that angle, I don't think it makes sense to present the authority or God with brightness and the darker lower end of the range with Lucifer. I think that's a very religious view of it, right? The brightness is God and the darkness is Satan. So if I reverse these roles, though, they don't make sense thematically. Lucifer at the beginning of the story is not in a position to overshadow and cause the darker voice to, not be heard, to cover it up, in which case it would also put God's voice as our narrator in the first track, and like the whole thing just kind of falls apart there. So I'm abandoning this theme at the moment. We'll get into the lyrics here, and when we finish the song up, maybe I'll have a different perspective of it. But right here, musically looking at it, the end of track 5, 20 minutes to go, I don't think that's something they were going for, because I just don't think it's as solid as a theme as it felt at the beginning of the album. And I think that's about it. I do want to talk for 1 second about the rhythm that came up at the end. This was totally new. We haven't heard anything like it before. We've had solid triplets, which is a rigid idea. We've had solid quarter notes and eighth notes. Those are both rigid ideas. We had a little bit of playfulness just with jumping between eighth notes and quarter notes before to create a bit of a bouncing idea with the cymbals. And we've had some shorter notes paired with longer notes in the vocals just to give it a little bit of extra oomph. But we haven't seen anything like this. In the drums, we had a quasi-hemiola, which is just a fancy word for saying 3 against 2 polyrhythm. And that's when you have 3 beats in, you have one instrument doing 3 beats in a bar and the other instrument doing 2 beats in a bar. And you get something that sounds like this. And the drums were close to it. I think there was a little bit of a rhythmic thing that they was adding on to the end of it just to make it a little fancier, to give it a nice little bit of boost and extra energy. But the first 70% of it is straight up the beginning of a hemiola polyrhythm. And I think it's interesting that this is the first time that I hear a polyrhythm that is not 3 against 4. It is not 2 opposing instruments. Usually the polyrhythms are guitars versus drums. Usually guitars versus cymbal or guitars versus snare. This is inside of an instrument. We have snare versus bass kick, and it's 3 against 2, not 3 against 4. So assuming that any of this means anything, I've been trying to tie the meter and the polyrhythmic concepts to this idea of a war being waged. To tie that in here, assuming I'm correct, whoever the 4 is representing in this tale is half as powerful as they were. They do not have quite the same authority. And assuming that we're looking at this properly, and assuming that this is even all intentional at all, the authority would have been the 4 to begin with. And their strength, their power has been cut by this point in time. But I'm also looking at a very small part of a larger section, because there's also strings and guitars and vocals at this point. So, it might have just been a cool thing the drummer wanted to put in there. But I do think it's pretty cool, though. It's the first polyrhythm we've heard that isn't 3 against 4 this entire song. I guess let's get into the lyrics real quick, and then we will finish this track up. We got Aggressor and Suppressor, and Usurper. Oh, what? This looks like Stabees. Too many S's. This looks like it's multiple. We have Eve. And it looks like Eve is speaking about different ideas. Then we have Lucifer come back in, then Eve, then the authority drops back in, then Lucifer comes back in, the authority comes back in and finishes out the album. So the authority is the final voice, and that's the one that's going to be all gnarly at the end. All right, so Eve speaking about the word of the false god, which I'm kind of confused on this. We keep jumping back and forth calling them, I'm sorry, trying to fix this thing. They keep jumping back and forth between calling them the authority and the false god, and I'm kind of getting upset about that because it's making it difficult to figure out if they really mean they're the same thing or if they are actually two different entities entirely. So anyways, I have heard your plea in the coaxes of leaves, in the coaxing of leaves, the empty appeal contorted by intent. There is malignancy, frequencies distinct beneath the majesty, a potent tragedy, subtle fractures, imperfections. Coursing hemoglobin, heart pummels out a rhythm, so misaligned, so obstinate, decisions unwilling to give. And how I read this is just the false god, the one who wants to imply his own will on everybody, wants to control everything. Eve is saying, I'm not jiving with this, man. I don't dig this, right? She says that the appeal isn't there, right? To follow in your thing. She says the empty appeal is contorted by intent, right? It's not appealing to me because I see what you mean by it. You're not doing this for my goodwill. You're doing it for your own. You're a control fiend, kind of. Says there is malignancy here. It's beneath the majesty, but it's subtle fractures, it's imperfections in your intent, and it's not for me, man. Right? It has no appeal to me. It's empty. She says my heart pumps out of rhythm, and it's so misaligned with what you've said that there's decisions that I'm unwilling to give my own body. The word comes up again. Will. Decisions unwilling to give. I'm not willing to do that. It's my will. Free will comes back to this. Then she speaks about Lucifer. Says there is urgency, the numbing certainty of their conviction pains me to hear. The choice is evident, the reins erode, I cannot hold alone. So basically she just says, I hear Lucifer's hymn, right? Oh, I forgot to read the, we'll get back to that. She says, I hear Lucifer's hymn, right? And dude, this is speaking to me. I feel it in my bones. I feel their conviction, and I work with that. It's on the same wavelength I am. I cannot hold this. The reins are eroding, right? I assume actually that would be the authority's reins over Eve are eroding, right? Let me back this up a second. Let's go look at Lucifer's hymn. It says, I construct no seat, for I will not rest, for I am no king, and I claim no throne. I will stand atop the highest point in hell, and I will raise my voice aloft, so that the crawling worm and the lofty bird shall know my sermon. So, God sits on his throne. He has a right-hand man, which is, Jesus? I don't remember which side Jesus is. I think Jesus sits on his right side. He's always portrayed as sitting at his throne. Lucifer is not. That ain't me. I'm working, right? I'm a working person. I'm no king. I don't have a throne. I'm not here to rest, right? I don't need a seat. He says, I'll go to the highest point that I have available to me, and I'll sing my sermon so that even the highest bird, so the creature furthest away from him, assuming laterally that hell is beneath the earthly plane, right? That I will sing as loud as possible so that the birds furthest away from me and the smallest of worms, so he says no creature is too big or too small for me, they will hear my sermon. He says, I seek eyes that see through worlds. I seek a mouth to voice my cause. I seek a tongue lined with silver so that my words are clear and just, for my Father has lied. He says, I want people who see things clearly for what they are. I want people who aren't going to tell lies, right? You guys will be my mouthpiece on this plane, right? And I'm going to tell you my words, and I want you to tell them to your brethren through clarity, No twisting of my words here, right? I want tongues that are lined with silver so that when you speak my words, they're heard clear and just. I want you to tell the world the authority is lied. That's him. There's a ton of conviction in here. So then anyways, Eve was all like, hey, yo, authority, this ain't working, bro. You know, I heard this other guy talking. I really like what he's selling over here. All right. So then Lucifer's all like, actually, Lucifer, I'm going to go back into reading it word for word now that we're caught back up. Strings that held limbs run through. I have struggled to hold on to. I was absent and in place now a wound. I am cursed with a sight beyond my eyes. Consequences and pitfalls lie ahead. So he says, something's up. I don't know what's up. He says he struggled to hold on to something, but in his absence, he now has a wound, and he's cursed with sight beyond my eyes. Like maybe he can see a future that is not in his favor, right? He's got foresight of calamity to come. He says there's consequences and pitfalls ahead of me. Says generations will grasp this flame, warm, lick, and enviable task. I was absent and in place now a wound. You are the hole that fills us. So maybe he's speaking to Eve and says, I can see grave times ahead. You know, you, humanity, are going to be the ones that help this out. Right? He says, you're the hole that fills us. Eve retorts, oh, this is him speaking as the snake in the Garden of Eden. Right? Eve retorts, I eat of this fruit that you offer me. Its taste is pungent and bittersweet. Its innate sourness cures the sepsis, a wealth so palatable despite its flaws. Forked tongue so baleful, contort and lash with wretchedness, from gaping jaw so unclean, cannot hope to hide their frown. So right off the bat, she even says, she's eating the fruit of knowledge, right? And she says it's not even that great. It's pungent, it's bittersweet, it has a sourness to it, but she says that all of it's worth it. It's a wealth so palatable despite its flaws. And of course, right here, she's not talking about the fruit. She's talking about the knowledge of free will, right? To know one's course in life, to know that you can do whatever you want, and sort of the fear of that, option paralysis. What do you do if you can do anything? What do you do knowing that your actions could have consequences now? Before, it was ignorance is bliss, right? You just went and lived your life and nothing bad ever happened. Now bad things can happen, but you have the option to choose that, right? Free will is kind of a terrifying thing. It is bittersweet, as she says. She even says it's a bit sour, right? But it's worth it despite its flaws. Next, she seems to just describe snakes. I'm kind of lost with this. Forked tongues contort and lash with wretchedness. Gaping jaws are unclean, and they can't hope to hide their frown. And of course, the devil was he became a snake when he entered the Garden of Eden. But I guess I'm not really sure how this works into anything other than just alluding to the shape that Lucifer might be right here. I don't know. The authority comes in though, and I'm sure he's going to be upset. The halls of Elysium ridden with consciousness. Oh, he's already mad that people are conscious. Go figure. The acid of their bile licking back teeth. Impudent menagerie swarms immutable, the mother her brood unavoidable constant. To conquer this opponent may cause as a format. To conquer this opponent, my cause has a format. Chastity and belittled through heredity. Your facade, the godhead of all that is impure, tortured alone in a Stygian hole. For what I claim, I bestow, I ordain, and I own, is within my image, and all will writhe. The pitiful mass, my constituency, and your pit will be feared along with its liege. I'm kind of at a loss here. I mean, he seems to be upset that since Eve has now tasted of knowledge, that the entire human race is doomed, right? The mother, her brood is unavoidable constant, right? So every human that comes from her, which will eventually be all of them, because she's the only woman, she's the first woman, they will all have this impurity, as he states it. And then he says it is within my image. So everyone I made within my image, so to speak, all of the humans, they will writhe, the pitiful mass. And I don't know if he's speaking to snakes, because this was in the Bible where the snakes lost their legs and they began to slither on their bellies. Or if he's speaking to Lucifer, but he says, you're going to sit in your pit, right? You're going to be feared down there. Lucifer comes back and says, how can it be, O beauteous Lord, the cornucopia of which you bled, the taut cloth of which you cut, your tools are blind and blunt. Going back to this idea of tools, where Lucifer raised an army who believed that they were sharpened like an axe. Says, the petty whims of a charlatan, the misogyny of a feeble man, many will suffer the fools who take up your filthy mantle. So, Lucifer says, there's free will out there. I'm sure some people are going to, go to your side. But honestly, you're petty, man. You're real petty up in here, right? And he says, anybody who follows your footsteps, the footsteps of a petty charlatan who is a misogynist, they're going to suffer, right? He mocking sage casts aspersions, so quickly finds his judgment lies with those who catch his sleight of hand, the parlor trick beyond the curtain. So he says, if you see past the curtain and you say, oh, this God guy's not real, you're going to punish him, right? That's what he says. He says, you quickly find judgment of anybody who sees past your facade, who sees your sleight of hand, who calls you out. Hey, that's not magic. I saw you flip the 8 of spades up to the top. And he's like, oh, well, guess what? You're going to hell now, right? He's so quick to judgment just because you got called out, because you're not perfect either. The authority says, stop. He says, yield. Lucifer says, I can't, I won't, it's not going to happen. The authority comes back and says, yield again. He says, how easy you throw stones, you lesser sun, you dimming of light, intense of a coup d'etat. Cloaked in benevolence, the last words sit upon your lips. So right now, the authority is upset. And this is the end of the track. So this is where we're getting that double vocal line that just sounds real gnarly. And it's almost like we're seeing the darkness in the authority. The mask has been thrown aside and we're seeing him for what he is vocally. We hear it in the vocal presentation. He says, you're cloaked in benevolence. The last word sits upon my lips. I get the last word here. With wings barbed, I swallow corridors of black thresh and snake. I am tar. I am viscid. I will riddle all with scorn. So again, showing the pettiness of God, which of course is even kind of backed up in the Bible a little bit. When humanity 1.0 was not up to snuff, he just wiped them out with a flood. So there's definitely a little bit of sarcastic lining up with actual events in the Bible that they're kind of drawing from right here to show this tarnished, very sludge-like version of God once the facade of perfection is removed. He says, I'm riddled with scorn and I will make them fear. Anatomy is now divisive, a form to lay the blame. So this right here, he just says, we're not going to have one person. I mean, according to this, I guess there is no Adam, right? There's just Eve. We don't see another Adam here. And he even says right here, I'm going to make two of them, right? And I'll allow them to lay the blame on each other, right? Just kind of going back in with Lucifer calling him a misogynist. Now he's created an environment where men can blame women for stuff just because they're a woman. I will divide the anatomy and have a form to lay the blame. The offer of bliss is now withdrawn. You guys can't have ignorance of bliss anymore. You guys will know the wrath that I can accrue. right? If you don't praise me, eternity damnation, hellfire, bring it. He says, I won't let you guys have that bliss anymore. You will know. Falling from my grace, her kin shall hate her for this descent, and her body racked with shame. So it says that her kin, her everybody who comes from her, so all of humanity will hate Eve because of what she did. And it's true. You don't get more misogynist than people who hate Eve for the original sin. Like, God and Christianity literally make women the original sinners. Lucifer calling the authority out as being misogynist is not a huge jump right here. So I like how this is an entertaining embellishment of events that the Bible kind of has. There's a lot of diversion from it, a lot of liberties taken with the story, but there's a lot of it that is also very critical of the ideas that are present in religion, specifically Christianity and Judaism. And I think I'm going to stop there. I know Islam is close to Christianity, but I know it also has a lot of its own differences as well. So I'm not going to lump it in there, but it's possible that it could also have many of these same criticisms applied to it. And then he even says her body will be racked with shame. Shame will be a tool to implement. So he literally says that humanity will be able to shame each other, and possibly even again alluding directly to shaming women. And he says the scouring of her will, nature is now impure, forever scrubbing clean that which cannot be, the bearer now obscene. So basically, no matter what, all humans are now unclean. You can scrub yourself clean as much as you want, but it's not going to work. You're always going to be seen as obscene. You're never going to be perfect. And that's the idea that we are always sinful. There is no way to wipe the sin clean, right? This is what the entire purpose of, this idea is kind of present throughout a lot of the Old Testament, but it was a lot of the reason why the New Testament was so hung up on showing Jesus coming through and, giving his life so that everybody's sins can be washed clean, because by nature we are sinful in a lot of this, in a lot of religious interpretations. And we have to go to God and ask for forgiveness for our sin. We can't wipe it clean, right? It's part of us. It's even part of us before we're born because of Eve in this reading. But we can always ask for forgiveness, right? We can just, well, actually, I guess that would be a New Testament reading. This Old Testament God is vengeful and wrathful, doesn't want forgiveness. He wants obedience. You obey him or you go to hell. But if you don't obey him, well, actually, it doesn't matter if you obey him or not. You're unclean. You're impure. You're always going to be imperfect in his eyes. Yeah, things are lining up. This is a huge indictment on, Judeo-Christian religion. And especially not even necessarily, we're just going to stick with this. It is an indictment on the religion itself. But it also speaks of ways that the religion has allowed these ideas to manifest in the practitioners as well. Again, the fact that I'm listening to this today, right now, if you know, you know. It is wild. Okay, let's finish this up. I have... Alright, we got one more track to go. Silver Tongue. 19 minutes long. Let's dive into this, see what's going on. What? This is just after God was so vengeful and yelling and saying, you all are going to pay for this. These are the ways I'm going to punish you. These are the things I'm going to let your fellow man do to punish you. And now we're like super chill. Although I guess the war's over, right? Oh, this was post-war, wasn't it? Because Lucifer, prior to that, was Lucifer, I think? And then he had the war, and then he was a fallen angel, and he named himself Lucifer, and that would be the start of this album. After the war, after he had been cast out. Yeah, so it wasn't gearing up for a war. Or I guess it's gearing up for a different war, proxy war. Not necessarily fought through armies, but fought through free will. Through another race, humanity. So now that Lucifer's won, and free will is present on Earth, all that's left is to sit back, right? Let the two ideologies go at it on the Earth plane. And maybe that's what the chill music is. It's not chill anymore. So every other bar we're reversing whether we accent downbeats or offbeats. Starting to really understand how they craft the chord progression too. Interesting to bring the acoustic guitar in there, or at least a clean electric possibly. There's a lot of hopefulness in here though. It's definitely not as heavy as some of the other sections we've heard. Interesting how they always bring up tension when I think we've finally resolved everything. that chord right there. I was wondering if you were going to stick on it or resolve up. Okay. I love how the bass kick right here is a heartbeat. See, once again, laying down this foundational cyclical looping element for a long time, adding more layers. The vocals, now this guitar line doing the eighth notes. Interestingly though, this section once again, actually this whole song kind of is missing the oomph, the power. Ooh, the first big fill of the whole song. Or the whole album. That tasteful bell hit. This chord right here, and listen to the next one. Into this resolution. Yeah, this is triumph, this is hopeful, this is victory, this is a vibes of a better future. Almost sounds like there's a choir in the backgrounds. interesting little interlude there.
Motes of dust effervesce, threads unbridled coalesce, with future's foresight choose their tethers.
I like how they left that little moment of a heavy breath on the microphone.
Seeing faces, reading tells in causality. In my hands alone, only one can unravel. They tie off knots in my ether. I, the prophet, sagacious child, motherless and fatherless, my soul alone do I trust, foretold apocrypha, seeds of change grow within, planted deep.
I can't tell if this is free time or not. Sometimes I got a 3, 4. Other times I got a 7, 8. Or a 7, 4, I guess, technically. It feels like more likely, though. It's just free time. And he's starting the next line whenever it feels natural for him. Ooh. This is definitely in 6/8 probably. It's also very, it could be 3/4 though, just to go along with how the rest of the album's been. It's very free though. It's not rigid at all. See what I mean? Every time I think we found resolution, they find a way to muck it up. So I guess this isn't really tense. The vocals I think are making it tense for me, but musically it's still very uplifting. It's very hopeful, very positive for the future. There's no way we have 90 seconds of silence here. Huh. So, Silver Tongue. What do I have to say about this track? Please, somebody answer me this regarding this band or even this album. Why is it that every time that they resolve something, the song is done and over with, they have to bring back the tension? Maybe when we get into the lyrics, I'll see something, it'll make sense, but I felt like this song ended 3 times at least, maybe 4. There is just, and I think this is my big problem here, and yeah, I'll just get into it, right? This should be part of my whole album analysis. I'm just going to put it here since it's on my mind though, and then we'll look more into this track. I really feel like this album could be half the length. And I know blasphemy, you know, how could you say that? It needs all of this. And like, I'm sure there are some people who get more out of this because of its repetition and its length. I understand the purpose of length, right? It's designed to make a payoff worthwhile, right? Like I've mentioned before with contrast, your 10 volumes can't feel loud if you don't have 3 volumes to contrast it, right? Eventually the 10 will just become the norm and it's not loud anymore, it's the normal, right? So when we get to elements like this, the point of it is to create contrast. We are within this section for so long that it has become normal that we need a shift, right? But the point is for it to feel normal so that the shift has more impact. When we lighten it up, it feels extremely light. It feels extremely relaxing, much like the beginning of this track, because we have been in the heaviness for so long. It's why the clean vocals at the end of this, and even particularly during Clarus, feel so prominent in the album. It's why they have such import to them. It is a rarity because of how long we go without clean vocals. And like I get it on a fundamental level, on an artistic level, I understand the point of it. For me though, the payoff never happens. We just kind of sit in a section for an elongated amount of time. I'm kind of done with it and we move on. This track, Silver Tongue in particular, at least the last half of it, seemed to utilize its time wisely, in that the reason we typically sit in a section for an elongated amount of time is because they're putting a ton of lyrics in the end. It just seemed to be a never-ending display of stanzas. But other tracks, even the first half of this track, we're sitting in these moments for a very long time, and I just don't see what the purpose of it is. To me, I never get the payoff, whether that's contrast or just the idea of representing an idea. You know, like the beginning of this could be the piece that comes after winning. You know, as I was talking about, he introduced free will to humanity, right? He has defeated the authorities' iron grasp on humanity, and this is him resting, right? And the rest is short lived. I mean, it's still long. It's like 2.5 minutes, but it's short-lived in against the idea of the rest of the album. 2 minutes in a 2 hour. I think it's a 2 hour, hour and 20 minutes. Yeah, it's an hour and 20 minutes. So an hour and a half. 2 minutes in an hour and a half album is nothing. So it allows for that to have weight because of that. It's a short-lived rest, because who knows, maybe there's still work to do, maybe the authority retaliated. We'll get into the lyrics of this track later, but that peaceful moment we know is short because 2 minutes is nothing. If all of these songs were traditional 3-minute lengths, a 2 minute resting period would just be another track. It doesn't have the same import. So there are moments that I think it worked, but just overall, moment to moment, most of these just did not work for me, and it really makes the album feel like it gets dragged out. To me, it feels like padding. And longtime viewers of the channel, you guys know I'm just not a big fan of long, drawn out slow burns to begin with. So it's very possible I'm just not inclined to enjoy what they're doing here, and maybe that's a hurdle in itself of me enjoying or understanding the purpose of them. And go ahead, hit me up in the comments. Like, I am more than open to hearing y'all's perspective on why you enjoy the tracks being so long. Right? Maybe it's a simple thing, like you just really love the vibe of the album and you don't want it to end as quick. Because this could, I think, very easily be a 40 or 60-minute album instead of an 80. And maybe you just really like it being that long, so you don't have to hit the reset button. Or maybe the album is a complete experience from beginning to end. It doesn't really work to repeat it for you, but you want it to last as long as possible, so you want the longest length. Or maybe you just really think it works well, that these songs would not have the same impact if some of these sections were cut out or shortened. Not even cut out, just shortened. I'm more than open to listening to your perspectives and trying to view the song through your eyes, or ears in this case. But for me, I found myself thinking quite often, when's the next part coming? And when it comes, it's a nice movement into it. The transitions are very clean. I mentioned last analysis segment that I love how they use the chord progression to foreshadow upcoming melodic changes, sectional changes. but that can be done without the elongated sections. That's going to happen regardless. Whenever we get to the end of section B going into C, we're going to have this transition, and the length of time we're here doesn't really impact that. So, I mean, just like I said, for me, it never really clicked the length. And I think that's going to be my biggest hurdle returning to it. So far, I really enjoy the narrative story I've been taking on from the first 5 tracks. We'll dive into the lyrics for track 6 in a second. And I think it is a phenomenal counterpoint to some of the issues in Christian religion. But I don't know that I could put myself through this again because of the length of some of these tracks. Primarily some of the aspects in it. Even, like I mentioned, the vocals I'm not too keen on either, so they weren't helping. But coming off of this last track, the first thing I thought is, man, I love the story being told here, but the music's not, really working for me. I want to turn this into a rock opera. Does anybody else feel that? Am I crazy for thinking that? Put it into a rock opera, give Lucifer, the Authority, and Eve all different voices, or all different singers, so that they all have different voices in the mix. Get rid of some of the longer sections. Like I said, some of them work, and some of them are necessary to achieve specific vibes later on in the album. So I don't know if I would pare down all of them, but some of these sections I do think have the same exact effect with half the bars. And just kind of, turn it into something that, at least in my mind, the music is crafted around the lyrics rather than, not the other way around, but at least to me it seems the music is crafted to fit a specific vibe. This is, at least in my mind, a post-rock band, and the music is very post-rocky. While there are some elements in here that I think thematically attribute to what's going on in the lyrics and kind of tying the music to the lyrical themes, the music itself isn't really that strongly connected. They're exploring the right themes and emotions, but I also think any other genre could also explore them. I don't think that this is like black metal, where we have a very specific oppressiveness to it. Especially since a lot of this song is very bright. The oppressiveness, I think, would need to be carried over for 2 of the tracks, but Amalgam, Matriarch, I think we could do well capturing those same emotions in a different vibe. And again, I don't want to say that my version that I have in my head, this rock opera variant of the Silver Tongue album, is better in any way. It's different, and that's the only way I would ever define it. But I do think that, at least for my own musical biases, I really enjoy the lyrics that are here, and I could hear them paired with a different kind of music that would fit my personal biases better than this song did. Like I mentioned earlier, I would like to revisit this song for the lyrical side, for the story it tells. I've enjoyed it, at least from 1 to 5. We'll see how 6 changes my perception of the lyrical side, but musically, it just never really clicked for me. There are a couple of moments that really worked, and there's a lot of moments that I appreciate. I like the intentionality of it, the artistic aspect of it. From a purely objective standpoint, there's a lot of really cool things going on in here. I've spent, like 2.5 hours now talking about them. Like, there's a lot of really great things to appreciate in here. But as a casual listener, this is not really a sound I want to revisit. And I think that's my big taking away point here on a casual perspective, is that I would love to revisit these lyrics, but not necessarily the music. And kind of like that weird part of my brain's like, hey, you should remake this, cover all 6 of these tracks, rock opera style, clean vocals, different vocalists on different voices. Uh, but yeah, like I said, it wouldn't be better. It would just be different. Now, track 6. Let's get back into this because track 6 has a lot of oddities to it. First of all, we start out with the relaxation segment, and I really thought it was going to last longer, and at like 2:30 in, we get real heavy again. The heaviness kind of gets rid of the foundational aspect, which I think rounds out the sound, so it feels heavier. Instead, there's sort of this emptiness underneath the music that makes it feel a bit empty, right? And I don't know what that represents. It could just be the lack of opposition. A lot of this album has been, Lucifer opposing the authority, or even in the later songs, Eve opposing the authority and, declaring free will. So there's always been this oppressive element. And now, even though it's still oppressive, right? He says, the authority says, if you don't like what I have to say, then you know what? No blissfulness, gloves are off, everyone's going to hell. Y'all will experience damnation unless you bow down to me, right? The oppression is still there. It's just, it's less overt. It's less, it's less imposed, I think I should say. Because remember, the original was a lack of free will. You always felt the opposition on you because no matter what you wanted to do, you went along with your predetermined purpose from the authority. Whereas now it's more of a felt oppression. That weight is off of your shoulders, but you no longer have the ignorance of bliss, and you know that if you make certain decisions, this God will be wrathful to you. But you don't feel his will directly imposed on you. And I think that's possibly what some of this is. Now that this weight is lifted, all that's really left is the beauty and the fuzz, the beauty of the melody and the fuzz of the instrument. And I think those combined create an interesting texture. It makes this middle part of the song feel very victorious and free and lively, right? Even though it's the same, it's probably a very similar melody line to where we started at track 1. Oh, beautiful is this burden. The burden of glorious purpose. The purpose that Lucifer gives himself. Yes, so the track 1 is about the realization that his job, his burden, what he needs to do, whether he likes it or not, which is interesting. Because that sounds more like predetermined purpose, not something he comes to his own free will to determine. A burden is not something you typically give yourself. It's something you feel you must do outside of your own will, is to give free will to others, which actually makes it sound pretty self-sacrificing. I will give up my free will and follow in the footsteps of my celestial purpose to provide free will for everyone else. Like, it really paints him very sympathetically. And, he finds a bit of bliss in this. He calls his burden beautiful, right? Although some of that might also just be vengeful. He went to war with God, failed, and he found a way to secretly take him down without direct war, right? Direct conflict. He'll do it through this other species. So yeah, he might be reveling in that sneakiness a little bit. But anyways, yeah, so there's this victory, there's this weight lifted off our shoulders. This whole middle section is just very soothing in a powerful way. We kind of move out of this into something that's a bit more subtle, and it fades out, and I'm like, that's the end of the song. And then I look at the thing, and there's like 10 minutes left, and I'm like, why? Seriously though, like every time, this would have musically, right? I don't know about the lyrics. Obviously, they had a lot more they wanted to say after this point, but musically, it felt complete to me at this point. And we had this really nice resolution into what felt like it could be an outro, and then bam, we're big and noisy again, and there's now disruption. There's instability in the notes, and we kind of ride this out until we kind of clear it up, and now it's bright again and uplifting, and I'm like, okay, we finished it out this time, and now there's a next section, and that section's quiet. It's kind of doing this back and forth that it does, and it fades out, and I'm like, cool, we're done. And then I look, and it's like, nope, we still got 5 minutes to go, and then we got another big section, and it's like it just feels like so many fake outs, and maybe it's purposeful, right? We start digging into the lyrics and it makes sense. I'm like, oh, that's why they did this. I really enjoy it. It's great from an artistic purpose. And then the song literally ends, and then we have like 45 seconds of silence, and then this booming outro that just kind of cuts off. Like, of every song has a fade in of white noise and a fade out of white noise. And then at the end of this song, at the end of the album, we have a fade out with white noise, and then the big booming fade back in that just abruptly stops when it reaches volume capacity, and we don't get a fade out on it. And I gotta dig into these lyrics because I gotta know what they were shouting. But musically, this song was very frustrating to me in the final leg of it. And especially, as I mentioned, I've already become a bit weary, I think, of just the length of all these songs. I've already been listening to the album for, at this point, an hour and 10 minutes. I've been talking about it for another hour and a half on top of that. We're getting close to 3 hours. I'm ready for the album to close up so I can get into the lyrics and, finish this up, speak my thoughts. And it just refuses to end. And I'm sure that didn't help. It probably compounded on how frustrating it felt. And maybe, like I said, maybe it's supposed to feel frustrating. I don't know. We'll get into that. But yeah, I had a lot of problems with this track. And I think a lot of it is not necessarily anything particular to it, because it is not very different from all the other tracks on this album. But it's a culmination of listening to it last on the album when I wasn't really casually here for it. This was definitely a critical album for me. And yeah, so I guess let's dig into the lyrics and see if we can't answer any of my burning questions here about what's going on, what this thing is about. So there's a lot of lyrics here, more so than the others, I think. And we start off with Eve. Says, he feasts upon his words, balladry of battles lost, omniscient megalith responsible for such death. My guess is this is the authority. He speaks of the battles lost in ballads, which is another word for poetry, which the Bible is written in stanzas and verses. My guess is that after losing, he went and had the Bible written to tell his side of the story. Even says that the omniscient megalith, which I don't know if it's pertaining to him or well, yeah, that would be him, is responsible for such death. Like, there's a lot of death in his name. What we have won carries with it the cost of fates much worse. The countless effort of the scorned will echo evermore. So it basically says, even though that we've introduced free will and it's caused a lot of deaths, that's not on us. That blood's not on our hands, right? You're the one who went and wrote your tomes that would inspire hatred among humanity. We just wanted to do what we wanted. You're the one who made us hate each other. That blood's not on our hands, right? It is not within my means to change this providence. Yarrow stick and ruined scrimshaw fall in patterns so bleak and sure. The garden never ours to own, we never lay within his lap, are interesting. Back to the idea of laying in the lap. Last time it was her lap, because we were talking about Lady Life, or some sort of personification of said life. Same line, no, but now with a his. We never lay within his lap. Our struggle won with gripe and grief, we cannot crave a fallacy. Pitiable roots, so certain a hindrance must be sought, blood-born ascendants bestowing rights to challenge. I'm not gonna lie, guys. I thought I've had a pretty good reading up to here, but a lot of this is going over my head. But we'll see where it flows, where it goes, and maybe we can retroactively view it from a new perspective. Charcoal glyphs to carry what words cannot past life, school our angered cries to enunciate our intent. With every generation, mercenaries, emissaries, unbound by gender's restraint, emancipate our faculties. That right there just says that our fight for free will be passed on generation to generation. Doesn't matter who you are, what walk of life you come from, you will be one of our tools, right? You'll be the tools of free will. You have to use your voice. Oh, they've said that multiple times. I like that. The minute that they silence us is the minute we lose free will. Getting that. My time is brief, a mere fragment. We lay down warp and weft with haste. We encourage time's indulge to watch over our aggregate. Spooling reams of fluent speech, florid blood in integers, recurring coils of chromosome, topographic anatomy. It's not just hands but desire, scored grooves for liquid fire, casting thoughts as daggers and tongues of silver ore. So this is saying, don't just make action with your hands, right? You're not just tools of weaponry. Don't just go don't just go protest, don't just go do the fights, don't do the things that just require your hands. It's not saying that those aren't worthwhile. It says it's not just your hands though. Use your mind, use your voice. Cast thoughts as daggers, so make sure your thoughts are sharpened. Keep up to date with whatever you need to know to continue to invoke your free speech. And your tongues of silver ore. Remember we talked earlier about tongues of silver being those who do not tell lies. Right? So speak the truth. Have a sharp mind. Use those as tools alongside your hands. So this is just Eve telling future generations what they need to do to continue practicing free will so that they don't get taken over by the authority. Flailing blights of wickedness through sordid jowls their agency, at each turn our folly bays to overthrow our victory. So no matter what, all through time, every turn that we make, every step we take, they are trying to overturn our victory. They're trying to take us down, right? Intarsia, genes within the weave, purposeful revelets of dust, weapons ensconced elaborate, a knife so sharp to cut. We are one sentience amid a plethora, sublunary minds to urge, dwelling beneath little teeth and claw, we beseech to you our proposal, which is, we offer up our progeny, and we urge of you the same as nations rise tectonic and earth and sea does strain. Guardians will flank our vessel, pale Ursus will show their mettle, a paradigm of allies standing close encircling. So it sounds like right here just says everybody around the world we need to come together to do this, right? That no matter what, around every corner, there's going to be agencies that try to take our free speech away, right? Or not free speech, our free will, right? And so from that angle, it almost sounds like this is slowly being warped from just Lucifer versus God to humanity versus authority of any realm. That people all around the world must come together, despite any of our differences, to say we will not be controlled like this. And we must resist any authority, not just the God authority. For his empire manifest on earth as it is in heaven, frail minds will underpine his faculty of dominion. So basically, if you're not, if you're weak of mind, if you can't think for yourself, if you lack critical thinking, you're going to fall to his dominion. You're going to fall to his mind control. The prophesized child. This has a colon after it. I'm guessing this is a person, a character. It says, motes of dust effervescence, threads unbridled coalesce, with future's foresight choose their tethers, embracing hands on present faces. Reading tells in casualties in my hands alone, only one can unravel the tie-off knots in my aether. I, the prophet, sagest child, fatherless and motherless, my soul alone do I trust, foretold Apocrypha. Seeds of change grow within, planted deep our final sin. Those opposed to the false god, we will build a council, a democracy, a nation of great magnitude. This is our apogee. A child to usher in this fate, to raise our impious war against the monarchy of God. We will climb so high, we will spread our hands and touch 10 million other worlds and sing our sermon. We are the silver tongue, the silver tongued. Yeah, so just bringing it all back and saying that, we're going to have to battle this through centuries, millennia, generations, and across all worlds, that this opposition is going to try to undermine us everywhere. We all have final sin planted deep within, which is free will. So, to all those who oppose the false god, we'll build our council, which is a democracy, right? We'll have a nation of great magnitude, much like Lucifer in hell, where he built his city. Not only that, but it says that we will stand high. We will continue the battle for Lucifer in continuing to spread the word of free speech. Climb so high, spread our hands, touch millions other worlds, and sing our sermon. We are the silver tongue. Interestingly, whatever was stated at the end is not in this lyric set, so I don't know what's going on there. I'm just going to assume it was important because they added it, but it still seems like a weird fake out for me after 45 seconds of silence to put that in there. A rising, right? It's an uprising too, but I wish I knew what they were saying to know if it is the authority uprising against this rise of free will, or if it's this prophesized child commanding the people around him to continue on with the good fight. So, yeah, I mean, once you get past all of the poetic language, right? And there's a lot of stuff in here. Like I said, I missed a lot of this, certainly in this track, but across all of them, that I would definitely need a dictionary nearby to understand what's going on, and half of it, especially referring to a lot of the metaphorical ideas. But it seems to be on its surface, once you get past that, the language barrier, right? And you start digging deep into the core ideas. Lucifer had just fallen. He planned to get back at God. He was going to, he found a way to do so, right? Through his own concept. He feels like he was controlled by the authority to go to war, which cast him down into hell. Like it wasn't his purpose. His purpose, as he deemed it, is not to be given to him by the authority, but to be found by oneself, which ends up being the continualization of learning of free will. And my brain went right to the Matrix. This dude's Neo. He found out how to get out, and he goes back in to help people get out. Not the connection I was thinking to make today. But yeah, so he learns of free will through his own actions and is the first one to break free, and he has decided to devote his life to helping others break free of their control of the authority. And it gets to the point where he gets the first human to understand free will and taints the entire human race with free will as seen through the eyes of the authority. The authority gets upset and starts acting like a little baby and says, fine, since you did this, everyone is going to pay. And so now we have Eve on Earth, who is telling all of her children, this is going to be a fight you're going to have to participate in, right? You have to keep your mind sharp and your tongue sharper so that you can constantly, push back the lack of critical thinking required to be put under the control of the authority, while also helping to free as many as you can around you. There is nobody who will be free of this. This is something that is going to be ongoing through all generations, forever, across all worlds. And then we get the prophesied child at the end who basically continues to push this idea. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, once you get past all the language, I think it's a pretty straightforward reading of it. It's just done so very intricately, vocabulary wise. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't know that there's a lot that kind of goes along with the music. I had my ideas at the beginning, but like the heavy versus the light, I abandoned because honestly, I think they're just designed to be together. There is weight in losing the blissfulness, right? So the free will is the brightness. It's what Lucifer discovered at the beginning of the album, what he wanted to teach everybody else, but there is weight to having free will, the knowledge that your actions have consequences, no longer having bliss to keep you ignorant of the negativity. You have that extra weight on you. Now, well, that kind of ruins my ending reading because it doesn't have that extra weight there. So maybe the weight is, oh man, I don't know. Maybe none of this is intentional because the patterns are really, they're kind of falling apart now that I'm scrutinizing them. Um, Yeah, the polyrhythms kind of disappeared a bit there in the middle. It kind of seemed like they were only popped up a couple of times where it fit, and I think it was really only the one song that made heavy use of them, and maybe that's the one time that they really enjoyed it, or maybe that they found a way to work it into ideas that they were already creating. The free rhythm versus rigid, I think actually works, but at the same time, like I said when I brought it up, every song kind of has to have rigidity in it to have meter presented by some instrument. Even at the end, when I feel like it is the most freeing and relaxing, there's still a rigidity to it because somebody's keeping the metronome in their instrument. So, I mean, that kind of gets chucked out the window. Um, yeah, and that's like, those are all the thematic ideas that I picked out at the beginning, and I really can't tie them back to the lyrics. Or, yeah, I can't tie them back to the lyrics. And then on top of that, like, even the vocal styles, aside from the double tracking of the very upset authority, there is no vocal style difference between Eve and Lucifer and the authority, other than when Lucifer is chanting his hymn, which I absolutely love that. I think it's a beautiful idea to make the hymn of free will sound like a traditional Catholic or a Christian church hymn. Just really great idea, and giving Lucifer a clean vocal for that section is perfect. It needed to be done. But outside of those two moments, everybody gets the same harsh vocal, and it doesn't work for me. I can't see Eve growling at people. And that's part of the thing that led me to the rock opera idea is, the music. I could probably even keep the music, but I need the vocals to change. And I'd really love for each character to have their own because, first of all, I think it greatly improves clarity, right? Can you imagine you're watching a film or something and every character is the same? Like they use green screens to just put the same person on everybody's body, the same face on everybody's body. So you never know who's who, and you just kind of have to guess based on their actions. Like that's not a great way to watch a film unless the intent is to confuse the viewer. And here, I don't think it is. I think this is supposed to be intentionally sympathetic to Lucifer to shed light on the criticisms of Christian religion and to show some of the ways that it's imperfect. I don't believe it's supposed to be a both sides kind of thing. So to give them the same voice muddies up that. If it wasn't for the fact that it was listed who was singing each of these sections, I don't think I would have walked away with half of the conclusions I did lyrically because I would have honestly thought they were all the same person. Yeah, I probably would have gotten very confused, and I was already confused with some of the vocabulary. So I'm fortunate that these lyrics happen to have those notes in them, but the music does itself no favors for that. And some people can look at that and say, oh, that's the puzzle, right? You got to figure out the puzzle for yourself. And it's one of the added layers of depth to learning what's going on, to to understanding it. And you guys know I love a good puzzle, right? When it comes to music, I approach it very puzzle-like. I look at a piece and I say, hey, what does this mean? I look at another piece. What does it mean? Oh, what do these pieces mean together? Like, that's how I analyze music. I ask a lot of questions of what things are doing. What do they mean? How does it work within this other context? But for me, that seems to be, the vocal section seems to be an unnecessary layer of obfuscation. That does nothing but muddy it up. It certainly does present a new layer for the puzzle, but I think it does more harm than good. And it could just be that they didn't have any other vocalists available to do it. It could be that this is just what they wanted, right? I don't know what led to it, but I do wish that all three characters had different voices. I like that Lucifer had both sides, the clean and the growl. I really like that. I like how the Authority had the growl and then the gnarly doubled up one. But Lucifer, the bass growl on Lucifer and the Authority, I think needs some different. It doesn't even need to be different vocalists. Just a little bit of different element to it. And maybe there is. Maybe my ear's just not tuned enough for it. But everything just kind of blurred together. And I think it really hindered it. If it wasn't for the lyrics the way they are, I would not have walked away with this as positive of an experience as I did. So yeah, like I said, aside from some of the vocal stuff, there really isn't much that lines up here between the two, and it feels like a post-rock song with the lyrics put on top of it, rather than an album where everything is designed to fit together perfectly. And that's fine. For an entire album to have musical themes interwoven through the entire thing rather than track by track, that interweave perfectly into the lyrical themes that are across the entire album rather than track by track. I mean, that right there that's a concept album. That's the basic concept of a concept album. And that's not something I expect every album to be. I don't expect every album that shows up on Album Review to be a concept album. Album's starting to sound like a really weird word. But the thing is, that's kind of the mindset I get into because of how I'm approaching this. These are critical reactions. I have my critical mind on. I'm looking for the patterns. So that's kind of, that's where I'm coming from with this this format. I'm approaching everything like it's a concept album. But like I said, it's not bad that it's not. I just really thought I saw some patterns coming into this that weren't there. But at the end of the day, I did enjoy the lyrics. I enjoyed the story it took me on. And there were a lot of things in the music to appreciate, even if most of the songs really didn't come together for me. But I do enjoy the contrast. I enjoy the variety of sounds that they put in here when they're using a variety. And I enjoy the mix. Like I said, it's clean, which works for me, but it's also a bit gritty, which I think works for most people who enjoy metal. Obviously, I'm not in that group. I like metal, but I'm obviously not the group that really likes metal. So those are my thoughts on Lightbearer's Silver Tongue. This is where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought of this one. If there's anything that stood out to you, anything that I touched on needs to be extrapolated on. I had a lot of questions. I missed a lot of lyrics. Just, start some conversations. I read every comment. I promise. The Umgwa album reaction is still getting comments today. It is easily my most viewed and most commented video in the past month, and I'm still watching every single comment and replying to ones that I have things to add to them. So the same's going to be here. I read everything, right? So if you got something you want to add, I'm definitely going to see it. Above the comment section, there's a description box. In there's a link for Linktree. Here you can go to Patreon and join the Patreon campaign, which will get you access to voting on albums or themes or songs, just generally having a little bit of a hand in controlling the direction of the channel. You can also pick up some merch, follow me on Twitter, join the Discord community, submit special selections, and more. There's a lot of links. Go ahead and check them out. My voice is getting a little tired. I'm trying to rush through this. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. Honestly, anybody who's still here at this point doesn't need to hear all this. But I do appreciate anybody who stuck around for the full 3 hours, whatever we're at. That wraps up for this. We have a Patreon thingamajig tomorrow, a live stream, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. UTC, I think. And then we'll be heading into next week's theme. All right, so which is not rock or metal. I think that's the theme. So we went from hip hop last week, which was not rock or metal, into another one that's not rock. And this is going to be a good month for just exploring stuff outside of the norm that we typically do on the channel. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time. I'm going to go take a nap or something. Thanks everybody for bringing Lightbearer to my attention. Like I said, I did enjoy this. And y'all have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening. Whenever you choose to not be cynical, but to be critical about the music you enjoy. See ya.